All right, we're on chapter 5 of The Princess and Curdie by George MacDonald. It much increased Curdie's feeling of the strangeness of the whole affair that the next morning, when they were at work in the mine, the party of which he and his father were two, just as if they had known what had happened. Okay, hold on. Just as if the miners had known what had happened the night before, right? I'm going to put on a mic so that I can be away from the camera. Just as if they had known what had happened to him the night before, began talking about all manner of wonderful tales that were abroad in the country, chiefly, of course, those connected with the mines and the mountains in which they lay. Their wives and mothers and grandmothers were their chief authorities. For when they sat by their firesides, they heard their wives telling their children the selfsame tales with little differences, and here and there one they had not heard before. Look at these. Giant. I just thought this would be like a beautiful setting for our story. Oh, it smells so good. And I was just showing there's mountains over there. These trees are giant. All right. I just go where I'm led, you know. And I was here for a friend's wedding. Oh, now we have a new bookmark. It just dropped for us. Okay. So they used to hear these stories from their grandmothers and mothers, and they called them children's stories, you know. For when they sat by their firesides, they heard their wives telling their children the self-same tales with little difference, and here and there one they had not heard before, which they had heard their mothers and grandmothers tell in one or other of the same cottages. At length they came to speak of a certain strange being they called Old Mother Wetherwop. Some said their wives had seen her. It appeared, as they talked, that not one had seen her more than once. Some of their mothers and grandmothers, however, had seen her also, and they all had told them tales about her when they were children. They said she could take any shape she liked, but that in reality she was a withered old woman, so old and so withered that she was as thin as a sieve with a lamp behind it, that she was never seen except at night and when something terrible had taken place or was going to take place, such as the falling in of the roof of a mine or the breaking out of water in it. She had more than once been seen. It was always at night, beside some well, sitting on the brink of it, and leaning over and stirring it with her forefinger, which was 6 times as long as any of the rest. And whoever for months after drank of the well was sure to be ill. To this one of them, however, added that he remembered his mother saying that whoever in bad health drank of the well was sure to get better. But the majority agreed that the former was right, the right version of the story, for was she not a witch, an old hating witch whose delight was to do mischief? One said he had heard she took the shape of a young woman sometimes, as beautiful as an angel, and then was most dangerous of all, for she struck every man who looked upon her stone blind. Peter ventured the question. Peter's the father, you know, of Curdie. whether she might not as likely be an angel that took the form of an old woman as an old woman that took the form of an angel. But nobody except Curdie, who was holding his peace with all his might, saw any sense in the question. Here's the picture in the book. This is a reproduced book from the 1800s, so it's free copyright. It's a reproduction. Oh, I plan to have it in the description so that you can download the book yourself as well and read if you want while you're listening. If I don't have it there, remind me. It's at Project Gutenberg for free. .org, I think. Okay. So, they said an old woman might be very glad to make herself look like a young one, but whoever heard of a young and beautiful one making herself look old and ugly? Peter asked why they were so much more ready to believe the bad that was said of her than the good. They answered because she was bad. He asked why they believed her to be bad, and they answered because she did bad things. When he asked how they knew that, they said because she was a bad creature. Even if they didn't know it, they said a woman like that was so much more likely to be bad than good. Why did she go about at night? Why did she appear only now and then, and on such occasions? One went on to tell how one night, when his grandfather had been having a jolly time of it with his friends in the market town, she had served him so upon his way home that the poor man never drank a drop of anything stronger than water after it to the day of his death. I was about to say, like I'm doing FaceTime, like, tell me if you see a bear behind me. There's bears in these woods. I just saw squirrels, that's why. She dragged him into a bog and tumbled him up and down in it till he was nearly dead. I suppose that was her way of teaching him what a good thing water was, said Peter. But the man, who liked strong drink, did not see the joke, the guy that was telling the story. They do say, said another, that she has lived in the old house over there ever since the little princess left it. They say, too, that the housekeeper knows all about it and is in hand and glove with the old witch. I don't doubt they have many a nice airing together on broomsticks, but I don't doubt either it's all nonsense, and there's no such person at all. When our cow died, said another, she was seen going around and around the cow house the same night. To be sure, she left a fine calf behind her. I mean the cow did, not the witch. I wonder she didn't kill that too, for she'll be a far finer cow than ever her mother was. My old woman came upon her one night, not long before the water broke out in the mine, sitting on a stone on the hillside with a whole congregation of cobs about her. Cobs were the goblins that were in the last story, The Princess and the Goblin. I read that too, if you want to read that. If you want to listen to that, I have it in a playlist. When they saw my wife, they all scampered off as fast as they could run, and where the witch was sitting there was nothing to be seen but a withered bracken bush. I make no doubt myself she was putting them up to it. Here she is. You guys know. I won't say. And they went on with one foolish tale after another, while Peter put in a word now and then, and Curdie diligently held his peace. But his silence at last drew attention upon it, and one of them said, "Come, young Curdie, what are you thinking of?" "How do you know I'm thinking of anything?" asked Curdie. because you're not saying anything. Does it follow then that, as you are saying so much, you're not thinking at all? Said Curdie. Do you get it? Sorry, I'm reading it along with you guys, you know. How do you know I'm thinking of anything? And he says, because you're not saying anything, you know, you must be thinking. And it says, does it follow then that you're saying so much that you're not thinking at all because you're talking so much, right? I know what he's thinking, said one who had not yet spoken. He's thinking what a set of fools you are to talk such rubbish, as if ever there was or could be such an old woman as you say. I am sure Curdie knows better than all that comes to. I think, said Curdie, it would be better that he who says anything about her should be quite sure it is true, lest she should hear him and not like to be slandered. But would she like it any better if it were true, said the same man. If she is what they say, I don't know, but I never knew a man that wouldn't go in a rage to be called the very thing he was. And here's Curdie again. If bad things were true of her, and I knew it, said Curdie, I would not hesitate to say them, for I will never give in to being afraid of anything that's bad. I suspect that the things they tell, however, if we knew all about them, would turn out to have nothing but good in them, and I won't say a word more, for fear I should say something that mightn't be to her mind, that might not be to her mind. They all burst out into a loud laugh. Hear the parson! You know, that's a preacher. They cried. He believes in the witch. Ha ha! He's afraid of her, and says all she does is good. He wants to make friends with her, that she may help him to find the gang. Gangue. I don't know what that is. Give me my own eyes and a good divining rod before all the witches in the world. And so I'd advise you too, Master Curdie. That is, when your eyes have grown to be worth anything, and you have learned to cut the hazel fork. Thus they all mocked and jeered at him, but he did his best to keep his temper and go quietly on with his work. He got as close to his father as he could, however, for that helped him to bear it. As soon as they were tired of laughing and mocking, Curdie was friendly with them, and long before their midday meal, all between them was as it had been. But when the evening came, Peter and Curdie felt that they would rather walk home together without other company, and therefore lingered behind with the rest of them when the rest of the men left the mine. Here's chapter 6, The Emerald. Father and son had seated themselves on a projecting piece of the rock at a corner where 3 galleries met. The one they had come along from their work, one to the right, leading out of the mountains, and the other to the left, leading far into a portion of it which had been long disused. Since the inundation caused by the goblins, it had indeed been rendered impassable by the settlement of a quantity of the water, forming a small but very deep lake in a part where was a considerable descent. They had just risen and were turning to the right, when a gleam caught their eyes and made them look along the whole gang. Far up they saw a pale green light, whence issuing they could not tell. About halfway between the floor and the roof of the passage, they saw nothing but the light, which was like a large star. Oh, shoot, there's a tick. There's another one. I was in another part of this field, and I was going to film, but I was like, all these mosquitoes came at me at once. Like 10 of them. 10 at once. That reminds me of that video where they thought Mickey Mouse had been had killed 10 giants, but he really just killed 10 flies at once. And they're like, 10 in one blow, come rescue the princess. And anyway. So they didn't know where the light came from. They saw nothing but the light, which was like a large star with point of darker color, yet brighter radiance in the heart of it. Whence the rest of the light shot out in rays that faded toward the ends until they vanished. It's funny because I was trying to get to this meadow, this marsh, but I couldn't remember where it was, and so I parked, and then the mosquitoes drove me away, and then I got here. Anyway. All right. So there's this radiance in the heart of it. Once the rest of the light, I'll plan to just read the rest of the time. The light shot out in rays that faded towards the ends until they vanished. It shed hardly any light around it. It shed hardly any light around it, although in itself was so bright as to sting the eyes that beheld it. Wonderful stories had from ages gone been current in the minds about certain magic gems which gave out light of themselves, and this light looked just like what might be supposed to shoot from the heart of a gem. They went up the old gallery to find out what it could be. To their surprise, they found, however, that after going some distance, they were no nearer to it, so far as they could judge, than when they started. It did not seem to move, and yet they, moving, did not approach it. Still they persevered, for it was far too wonderful a thing to lose sight of so long as they could keep it. At length they drew near the hollow where the water lay, and still were no nearer the light. Where they expected to be stopped by the water, however, water was none. Something had taken place in some part of the mine that had drained it off, and the gallery lay open as in farmer times. And now, to their surprise, the light, instead of being in front of them, was shining at the same distance to the right, where they did not know there was any passage at all. Then they discovered, by the light of the lanterns they carried, that there the water had broken through and made an adit to a part of the mountain of which Peter knew nothing. They were hardly well into it, still following the light, before Curdie thought that he recognized some of the passages he had gone so often through when he was watching the goblins. He was protecting the princess in the last book, and spying on the goblins to learn their schemes. After they had advanced a long way, with many turnings, now to the right, now to the left, all at once their eyes seemed to come suddenly to themselves, and they became aware that the light, which they had taken to be a great way from them, was in reality almost within reach of their hands. The same instant it began to grow larger and thinner. The point of light grew dim as it spread. The greenness melted away, and in a moment or two, instead of the star, a dark, and yet luminous face was looking at them with living eyes. And Curdie felt a great awe swell up in his heart, for he thought he had seen those eyes before. "I see you know me, Curdie," said a voice. "If your eyes are you, ma'am, then I know you," said Curdie, "but I never saw your face before." "Yes, you have seen it, Curdie," said the voice. And with that the darkness of its complexion melted away, and down from the face dawned out the form that belonged to it, until at last Curdie and his father beheld a lady, beautiful exceedingly, dressed in something pale green like velvet, over which her hair fell in cataracts of a rich golden color. It looked as if it were pouring down from her head, and like the water of the dust brook vanishing in a golden vapor ere it reached the floor. It came flowing from under the edge of a coronet of gold, like a golden crown, set with alternated pearls and emeralds on her crown. In front of the crown was a great emerald, which looked somehow as if out of it had come the light they had followed. There was no ornament else about her except her slippers, which were one mass of gleaming emeralds of various shades of green, all mingling lovely, like the waving of grass in the wind and sun. She looked about 25 years old, 25, and for all the difference Curdie knew somehow or other, he could not have told how, that the face before him was that of the old Princess Irene's great-great-grandmother. By this time, all around them had grown light. And now, first, they could see where they were. They stood in a great splendid cavern, which Curdie recognized as that in which the goblins held their state assemblies. But strange to tell, the light by which they saw came streaming, sparkling, and shooting from stones of many colors in the sides and roof and floor of the cavern, stones of all colors of the rainbow, and many more. It was a glorious sight, the whole rugged place flashing with colors. In one spot a great light of deep carbuncular red, in another of sapphirine blue, in another of topaz yellow, while here and there were groups of stones of all hues and sizes, and again nebulous spaces of thousands of tiniest spots of brilliancy of every conceivable shade. Sometimes the colors ran together and made a little river of lake of lambent, interfusing and changing tints, which, by their variegation, seemed to imitate the flowing of water or waves made by the wind. Curdie would have gazed entranced, but that all the beauty of the cavern, yes, of all he knew of the whole creation, seemed gathered in one center of harmony and loveliness, in the person of the ancient lady who stood before him, in the very summer of beauty and strength. Turning from the first glance at the circumfluent splendor, it dwindled into nothing as he looked again at the lady. Nothing flashed or glowed or shone about her, and yet it was with a prevision of the truth that he said, "I was here once before, ma'am." "I know that," said Curdie, she replied. "The place was full of torches, and the walls gleamed, but nothing as they do now, and there is no light in the place." "You want to know where the light comes from," she said, smiling. "Yes, ma'am. Then see. I will go out of the cavern. Do not be afraid, but watch." She went slowly out. The moment she turned her back to go, the light began to pale and fade. The moment she was out of their sight, the place was black as night, save that now the smoky yellow-red of their lamps, which they thought had gone out long ago, cast a dusky glimmer around them. Okay, chapter 7. What's in a name? For a time that seemed to them long, the two men stood waiting while she, the mother of light, did not return. So long was she absent that they began to grow anxious. I'm going to turn the camera this way for a little bit. Towards the mountains. All right. So long was she absent that they began to grow anxious. How were they to find their way from the natural hollows of the mountain, crossed by goblin paths, if their lamps should go out? To spend the night there would mean to sit and wait until an earthquake rent the mountain, or the earth herself fell back into the smelting furnace of the sun, whence she had issued. For it was all night, and no faintest dawn in the bosom of the world. Like there was no other way to get lights down there. So long they did wait, unrevisited, that had there not been two of them, either would at length have concluded the vision a home-born product of his own seething brain. And their lamps were going out, for they grew redder and smokier. But they did not lose courage, for there is a kind of capillary attraction in the facing of two souls that lifts faith quite beyond the level to which either could raise it alone. And they knew that they had seen the Lady of Emeralds, and it was to give them their own desire that she had gone from them. And neither would yield for a moment to half-doubts and half-dreads that awoke in his heart. And still, she, who with her absence darkened their air, did not return. They grew weary and sat down on the rocky floor, for wait they would indeed, wait they must. Each set his lamp by his knee and watched it die. Slowly it sank, dulled, looked lazy and stupid. But ever as it sank and dulled, the image in his mind of the Lady of the Light grew stronger and clearer. Together the two lamps panted and shuddered. First one, then the other went out, leaving for a moment a great red, evil-smelling snuff. Then all was the blackness of darkness up to their very hearts and everywhere around them. Was it? No. Far away, it looked miles away, shone one minute, faint point of green light, where who could tell? They only knew that it shone. It grew larger and seemed to draw nearer, until at last, as they watched with speechless delight and expectation, it seemed once more within reach of an outstretched hand. Then it spread and melted away as before, and there were eyes, and a face, and a lovely form, and lo, the whole cavern blazing with lights innumerable, and gorgeous yet soft, and interfused so blended, indeed, that the eye had to search and see in order to separate distinct spots of special color. The moment they saw the speck in the vast distance, they had risen and stood on their feet. Like we all ought to, a man ought to, when a woman enters a room. When it came nearer, they bowed their heads, yet now they looked with fearless eyes, for the woman that was old and yet young was a joy to see and filled their hearts with reverent delight. She turned first to Peter. "I have known you long," she said. "I have met you going to and from the mine and seen you working in it for the last 40 years. How should it be, madam, that a grand lady like you should take notice of a poor man like me?" said Peter humbly, but more foolishly than he could have then understood. He could then have understood. "I am poor as well as rich," said she. "I too work for my bread, and I show myself no favor when I pay myself my own wages. Last night, when you sat by the brook, and Curdie told you about my pigeon and about my spinning, and wondered whether he could believe that he had actually seen me, I heard all you said to each other. I am always about, as the miners said the other night, when they talked of me as old Mother Wotherwop." The lovely lady laughed, and her laugh was a lightning of delight in their souls. "Yes," she went on, "you have got to thank me that you are so poor, Peter. I have seen to that, and it has done well for both you and me, my friend. Things come to the poor that can't get in at the door of the rich. Their money somehow blocks it up. It is a great privilege to be poor, Peter, one that no man ever coveted, and but a very few have sought to retain, but one that many have learned to prize. You must not mistake, however, and imagine it a virtue. It is but a privilege, and one also that, like other privileges, may be terribly misused. People can misuse poverty, and they can misuse richness." "Hadst thou been rich, my Peter, thou wouldst not have been so good as some rich men I know. And now I am going to tell you what no one knows but myself. You, Peter, and your wife have both the blood of the royal family in your veins. I have been trying to cultivate your family tree, every branch of which is known to me, and I expect Curdie to turn out a blossom on it. Therefore, I have been training him for a work that must soon be done. I was near losing him and had to send my pigeon. Had he not shot it, that would have been better, but he repented, and that shall be that shall be as good in the end. She turned to Curdie and smiled. Ma'am, said Curdie, may I ask questions? Why not, Curdie? Because I have been told, ma'am, that nobody must ask the king questions. The king never made that law, she answered with some displeasure. You may ask me as many as you please, that is, so long as they are sensible. Only I may take a few thousand years to answer some of them. But that's nothing. Of all things, time is the cheapest. Then would you mind telling me now, ma'am? For I feel very confused about it. Are you the lady of the silver moon? Yes, Curdie, you may call me that if you like. What it means is true. And now I see you dark and clothed in green, and the mother of all the light that dwells in the stones of the earth. And up there they call you old Mother Wotherwop. And the Princess Irene told me you were her great-great-grandmother, and you spin the spider threads and take care of the whole people of pigeons. And you are worn to a pale shadow with old age, and are as young as anybody can be, not to be too young, and as strong, I do believe, as I am. The lady stooped towards a large green stone. Embedded in the rock of the floor, and looking like a well of grassy light in it, she laid hold of it with her fingers, broke it out, and gave it to Peter. There, cried Curdie, I told you so. 20 men could not have done that, and your fingers are white and smooth as any lady's in the land. I don't know what to make of it. I could give you 20 names more to call me, Curdie, and not one of them would be a false one. What does it matter how many names if the person is one? Ah, but it is not names only, ma'am. Look at what you were like last night, and what I see you now. Shapes are only dresses, Curdie, and dresses are only names. That which is inside is the same all the time. But then how can all the shapes speak the truth? It would want thousands more to speak the truth, Curdie, and then they could not. But there is a point I must not let you mistake about. It is one thing the shape I choose to put on, and quite another the shape that foolish talk and nursery tale may please to put upon me. Also, it is one thing what you or your father may think about me, and quite another what a foolish or bad man may see in me. For instance, if a thief were to come in here just now, he would think he saw the demon of the mind, all in green flames, come to protect her treasure, and would run like a hunted wild goat. I should be all the same, but his evil eyes would see me as I was not. I think I understand, said Curdie. Peter, said the lady, turning then to him, you will have to give up Curdie for a little while. So long as he loves us, ma'am, that will not matter much. Ah, you are right there, my friend, said the beautiful princess. And as she said it, she put out her hand, and took the hard, horny hand of the miner in it, and held it for a moment lovingly. I need say no more, she added, for we understand each other, you and I, Peter. The tears came into Peter's eyes. He bowed his head in thankfulness, and his heart was much too full to speak. Then the great, old, young, beautiful princess turned to Curdie. Now, Curdie, are you ready? She said. Yes, ma'am, answered Curdie. You do not know what for. You do, ma'am. That is enough. You could not have given me a better answer or done more to prepare yourself, Curdie. She returned with one of her radiant smiles. Do you think you will know me again? I think so, but how can I tell what you may look like next? Ah, that indeed. How can you tell? Or how could I expect you should know? But those who know me well know me whatever new dress or shape or name I may be in. And by you will have learned to do so. But if you want me to know you again, ma'am, for certain, said Curdie, could you not give me some sign or tell me something about you that never changes, or some other way to know you or thing to know you by? No, Curdie, that would be to keep you from knowing me. You must know me in quite another way from that. It would not be the least use to you or me either if I were to make you know me in that way. It would be but to know the sign of me, not to know me myself. It would be no better than if I were to take this emerald out of my crown and give it to you to take home with you, and you were to call it me and talk to it as if it heard and saw and loved you. Much good that would do, Curdie. No, you must do what you can to know me, and if you do, you will. You shall see me again in very different circumstances from these, and I will tell you so much. It may be in a very different shape. But come now, I will lead you out of this cavern. My good Joan will be getting too anxious about you. Their mother and wife. One word more. You will allow that the men knew little what they were talking about this morning when they told all those tales of old Mother Weatherwop. But did it occur to you to think how it was they fell to talking about me at all? It was because I came to them. I was beside them all the time they were talking about me, though they were far enough from knowing it, and they had very little besides foolishness to say. As she spoke, she turned and led the way from the cavern, which, as if a door had been closed, sunk into absolute blackness behind them. And now they saw nothing more of the lady except the green star, which again seemed a good distance in front of them, and to which they came no nearer, although following it at a quick pace through the mountain. Such was their confidence in her guidance, however, and so fearless were they in consequence, that they felt their way neither with their hand nor foot, but walked straight on through with pitch-dark galleries. When at length the knight of the upper world looked in at the mouth of the mine, the green light seemed to lose its way amongst the stars, and they saw it no more. Out they came into the cool, blessed night. It was very late, and only starlight. To their surprise, 3 paces away, they saw seated upon a stone an old countrywoman in a cloak which they took for black. When they came close up to it, they saw it was red. "Good evening," said Peter. "Good evening," returned the old woman, in a voice as old as herself. But Curdie took off his cap and said, "I am your servant, princess." The old woman replied, "Come to me in the Dove Tower tomorrow night, Curdie, alone." "I will, ma'am," said Curdie. So they parted, and father and the son went home to wife and mother, 2 persons in one rich, happy woman. All right, the next chapter is called Curdie's Mission, chapter 8. I wish you so much love. Thanks for being here. Share this and go to the playlist and watch my other videos, all you'd like. Much love.